do I have to sit with the plant?
All right.
My name is Ben Burgis. This is Jennifer. This is Ryan Lake. We are not usually all in the same window, but Ryan is visiting since everybody's vaccinated, so we can actually do that now. And
we need to save money. They charge per window. So.
Yeah. We can only afford one window. Everything else is, a lot of stuff going on in season 2. So the only way to make it work is if we economize on windows. We're joined by our producer Forrest. We are also going to be joined by our graphic designer Andy. And I know Cale Brooks said he had things to say, and I don't know, maybe after some other people leave, we can get him in for a minute at the end or something, but it's getting a little crowded. So he's
not going to be in this window, is he?
Yeah,
right here. You can sit on Ben's lap.
Yeah.
Well, Ben's got me paying for my own window, so I can't really this.
So we are talking about Stanley Kubrick's 1971 film, a Clockwork Orange. I am not going to do some kind of shtick where I try to speak in the dialect from the movie. That's the sort of thing that we do in one of these movie streams, but I think that's a level beyond what I'm going to do for that.
I'm surprised that the three of you don't have milk.
Got my dragon's milk.
Yeah. Oh, all right. There we go.
Yeah, fair enough.
There he is.
Cale, we already made this joke about the.
I didn't get a notification.
Yeah. So a lot going on in this movie. I think it's.
How come it's only your name there?
Here, you go nuts. Here's the keyboard.
I feel left out.
Okay, let's see. Where's the? How do we even do this? I forgot.
What about Ryan?
This is a very professional, high-level YouTubing going on right now. Yeah, here we go.
Here, I got you.
You refer to me as Dr. Ryan Lake.
Change it to the Burgess family. There you
go. Forrest, why don't you tell us about Clockwork Orange?
Oh, I get put on the spot here. Well, it's thrown into kind of a dystopic England, where gangs of ruffians are kind of running around this I guess proto-fascist dystopia. I think as the movie progresses, we understand that it's more and more fascist. But I think honestly, it's really interesting, like reading all as much about neoliberalism as I have this year, and like this movie kind of queuing up like a Thatcherite England, pretty much. I mean, like in the decade like before that really even was the thing, like the lead up to it. I think is a big part of this movie.
Yeah.
Beginning with the rampant kind of drug use, despite the fact that I think they kind of allude to the fact that drugs have been made illegal, except for these like synthetic drugs mixed with milk, which is pretty funny, I think, because only in England could that really be a thing. But yeah, so like gangs of ruffians are kind of running around assaulting everybody, to the point where in the very beginning of the movie, where they finally assault a homeless man, and the homeless man is screaming for law and order, which is kind of like the most ironic twist of everything.
The guy, this guy who's sleeping, under a bridge, drinking and singing, and is normally exactly the sort of person who would be worried about being hassled by the cops, is yelling about law and order because things have gotten exactly that bad. And you see, we lost Andy. All right, there we go.
I'm back. Sorry, just a little issue with my internet, but it should be good now, hopefully.
For a second there was one of you there, and there was one of you in the waiting room, and it looked like we were being joined by two Andys.
There's a lot of me out there. I'm often actually stopped. Like one time I was like eating at a diner in Jersey, and this dude comes up to me. He's like, "Hey, Joe, huh? You're Joe, right? No, dude. There's a guy who looks just like you. His name's Joe."
You froze for that punchline.
He said,
Oh, man.
actually, he didn't freeze for me. He said, this guy just looks just like you. His name is Joe.
Oh.
Oh, yeah. No, apparently we've got Joe in the chat. There he is.
There's Joe.
Yeah. So, fair enough. And, I mean, a lot of the appeal of the movie, it's, it's super atmospheric. You have like the music is the music is very effective. Just the sort of lurid strangeness of this like lightly science fiction setting. Ryan was pointing out. I will say that Jen and I were both finishing our grades last night, and then Ryan came by this afternoon, and so we ended up instead of doing the usual thing and rewatching the movie the night before. We ended up watching the movie, pretty much just now. And also, by the way, apologies for the late start.
It was an Indiana Jones slide under the door. Didn't quite make it this time.
Yeah, tried to go back for the hat, and the door came down, and we lost an arm. But I was interviewed on the Pacifica about the new book, and that kind of came together at the last minute, and that also kind of delayed things. But also very happy to be doing this now. But anyway, as we were just watching it together, as it worked out, Ryan was pointing out that this is like a really interesting sort of lightly science fiction future. Like you have this strange futuristic looking machine that he's playing music on, but he's still playing it from a cassette tape.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite things from that kind of 70s sci-fi is like there are certain things they can imagine that will change, but certain things that's just beyond their comprehension that we would ever play music on anything other than a cassette tape. Which is
another really big thing that kind of fits into that is when the homeless guy says, "We could put a man on the moon, but nobody listens to earthly law anymore." Which you'd think that in this like 1995 future we would have gone farther than the moon, I think.
Yeah, it got stalled on the moon. So I guess that at least that prediction's right.
I kind of compare this mentally to like RoboCop in a way, like the way that Verhoeven kind of predicted the coming of like data-driven Law and Order. This kind of does the exact same thing, but of course it's a more romanticized England, which I mean I think that makes sense for what England was going through at the time. Like they had reverted back to like a more almost like romantic notion of like of kind of boring bureaucracy rather than like a technological, like a techno dystopia.
Yeah, there's tons. I mean, that's one of the things that is really striking is like how much time they spend on the bureaucracy. Like they actually make you watch them like fill out the form. Like they do like, I mean, this is a 2.5 hour movie almost, and they make you spend like 5 minutes watching him fill out forms and watching the exaggerated comedic like Nazi guard, like just like they really draw that stuff out.
It's like, okay. Yeah, the way he says it is like, sign here, sign here.
Yeah. Sign here. Yeah. Like, you're going to make us watch him actually sign each line of the form, like really to drive that.
Yeah, really
drive that point home.
Make you feel the overpowering, bureaucracy. And see him be, strip searched. So yeah, no, that's definitely there. But I don't know. Somebody would take us through the plot a little bit.
Yeah, hold on. I'm gonna pull up like a more, because I feel like everything kind of gets disconnected in my mind, so it's not like a summary the way that it goes from beginning to end. But yeah, so we kind of start with them in the milk bar.
Cordova milk bar.
Yeah. So
I have one question like right away with the milk bar, and like with a lot of the things you see, because the scenes are just like so like for this is supposed to be in like you said, this is a kind of authoritarian future we're imagining, but you have this milk bar where the tables are like these women in these like, you know, ridiculous positions, like, and like they're drinking milk out of breast statues and like all this stuff. And like, I wonder how much are we supposed to trust what we're seeing, or how much of this is the narrative that we're getting through Alex's eyes? Like, how much of this is Alex's perception of the world versus what's really there?
Well, he makes sure to tell you that it's his perception of
the
world.
I mean, he says
throughout it,
like, I'm your narrator. I'm your narrator. I'm your narrator.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how much we're supposed to trust like what the milk bar looks like and a lot of the things that we see.
Which is like the literary trope that, you know, a lot of authors love to do, of like the like the reliable narrator turned unreliable. Like, you know, you start questioning how much of like this person's extremely addled mind by the end of it you're supposed to trust. But yeah, so I guess going through the plot, so him and his three droogs are sitting at the Cadova milk bar, and they explain throughout that like the milk that they're drinking is laced with some kind of synthetic drug, and there's a bunch of different drugs that, you know, they can choose from within that. And then they leave the bar and they head out for their nights of ultra violence, and that's when they encounter the homeless guy, and they all beat him like pretty much, you know, within an inch of his life, really mercilessly. And, you know, but the fact that they're all wearing these like ridiculous like outfits kind of takes you out of the fact that, you know, it's such a moment of like extreme violence that you're witnessing. So following that, they find another gang, Billy Boy's rival gang, that are preparing to rape a woman, and they all walk in, and, you know, the two gangs get into this weird turf war in like this theater space, which kind of plays up the theatrical nature of everything, you know, because it's like they're all kind of on the stage beating the shit out of each other. And even the way that they're like preparing to rape the woman is kind of like, it's almost like a play, like she's running between them and they stop her, and it's like this almost like operatic, I guess, version of like a rape
melodrama scene. There's a certain melodrama to her movements and how she's reacting to everything. So yeah, it is very theatrical. Yeah. Also, what's interesting is at this point in the movie, you'll notice like everything's very symmetrically shot, and especially down these long hallways, which is fascinating because it allowed like perspective to keep your eyes, you know, pinned in to what's going on in the center. Like no matter what horrible things they're doing, it's all shot in like long hallways where like, you know, the perspective is just leading your eye right to the middle of the action. And but also like the sense of symmetry that Kubrick uses, you know, creates a foundation of being comfortable. So even though you're watching these horrible things, you're somehow comforted by it, by that symmetry. You know, as the film goes on and he loses that comfort, they stop shooting things symmetrically, and then, you know, so which is fascinating. But anyways.
Yeah, which kind of plays into the fascistic nature of it, you know, the concept of ultra violence rather than violence, like this theatrical, symmetrical version of violence. That's, you know, that it's horrible to watch, but at the same time, it's like almost like, I mean, not beautiful, but like it's prepared for you, you know, in this way. Like you're kind of watching these, like you're watching things that have been choreographed.
Yeah, it is a weird juxtaposition because, like, on the one hand, like, in a way, it's not as brutal as what you see in a lot of like action movies now, but and part of that is just the way it's shot, like you're talking about. But it is like this it's absolutely brutal. Like in a way, it's like harder to watch than like any contemporary action movie or horror movie or anything. I think
that becomes extremely true. As they leave, you know, the next scene that, you know, they're in that Durango 95 and
scene in the house when they break into the house.
So that's kind of where it becomes the most true. I think that it's absolutely horrible to watch, but, you know, going in order, I guess they're traveling in this Durango 95, and it's clearly like some kind of green screen thing behind them. Like it doesn't even look like they're in a real, you know, like the world moving behind them. Like although people are, you know, getting out of their way, it doesn't.
It's a green screen or rear projection.
It might be a real projection. I'm not sure how they how Kubrick would have filmed it.
I mean,
But you know,
it
it's
looked
like
like your projection to me, but that's just me. So
yeah.
I liked so for the like really extreme unreliable narrator suggestion, like somebody in the chat says him and his buddies all in white taking meds, psych hospital.
Yeah. I like it. I
A different.
I want to explore that conspiracy theory in a lot of detail. We need to go here just to lay that out for us.
And the psych hospital is located in the same film studio that they shot the moon landing in.
Yeah.
Adding to the.
This is actually Kubrick's first confession, or is this before The Shining? I don't remember.
Yeah, it's definitely before The Shining.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I also like this. I don't know, something about the fact that they are all dressed identically. Like, does like I don't know, like you were talking about fascism earlier. Like, I mean, it is all like their uniform, and especially because later on in the movie, one of the little twists is that the other droogs, you know, the members of Alex's gang, have been hired by the cops, and you know, so the next time you see them, you know, they're still wearing identical uniforms, just not the same ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess continuing on to this thing to kind of make Ryan's point. So they stop for the old surprise visit, which Alex says is his favorite, you know, ultra violent move to make, where they walk into like this, he starts banging on this writer's door, and the wife comes and lets him in because he says his friend is on the road, like, you know, bleeding to death or whatever, and they let him in to use the phone, and then the four, like, now that he's in, like, the four of them get in and they all start, and they like, you know, push the guy to the ground, and there's this awful, like, really, really horrendous scene where, you know, they're focused in on the writer's face as they prepare to like rape his wife, and Alex is singing in the rain, which apparently isn't improvised. That was something that Malcolm McDowell added as like an improvised scene to the movie. But that really makes, you know, Ryan's point about how really awful these scenes of violence are, even as it's kind of theatrical and, like, you know, playing up the theatrical nature of you know, Alex singing in the rain as he's preparing to do this, and he's wearing this mask that, you know, of course it's I don't know, it's like a theatrical and, like, you know, extremely phallic mask that he's wearing.
Now, have everybody seen the movie If from I think '68, if I remember correctly?
I don't think I've seen this.
No,
It's a black and white Malcolm McDowell movie. Basically, Kubrick saw it and said, "That's my Alex." After he saw it, like there was nobody else but Malcolm McDowell, because it's spiritually a prequel. You know, the two movies have nothing to do with each other. It's about a hooligan going to school and with his friends, and you know, this is when Malcolm McDowell was actually still a teenager. You could barely pass for one in this movie, but you know, whatever. He's supposed to be like, you know, 18 at the end of the film, and obviously he's not. He's not even 18 at the beginning of the film. But anyways, but he actually was a teenager in this film, and I mean, it actually ends with him breaking into the school, stealing their machine gun, and just starts opening fire on campus.
Oh, wow.
And you know, this is England in the '60s, so like, it's a very it's kind of a shocking movie, not in the same way that A Clockwork Orange is, but you know, there was this kind of undercurrents, and it's been years since I've seen this movie because it's not easy to find. But definitely worth checking out, and kind of where we're kind of coming from, where they're, you know, in a way they're kind of building on a lot of the violence off of If, you know, for this, you know. And of course, you know, you don't see the bodies fall. You just see Malcolm McDowell with a, you know, machine gun being fed into it by like a little 14-year-old boy, you know, as he's just mowing down people.
Nice.
And that's kind of the end of the film. Sorry to ruin it for you.
Well, now I'm not going to watch it. Come on.
No, it's really fascinating. Just like the whole progression to get there. Like, you know.
Can we just take a moment to note, like, Malcolm McDowell in this movie is like, this is, for me, this is like one of the great performances of all time. Like, this is just an amazing.
Yeah, he was snubbed at the Oscars too.
yeah, that's which is. I guess I can see how the Oscars maybe were afraid to deal with this movie, but yeah, I mean, he's just incredible.
There's it kind of, I mean, I don't know, you can see of course movies is kind of like the cultural foundation of, you know, I mean, part of the cultural foundation of, you know, what leads to the political. And you know, it's clear that in England during this time, you know, like as their influence is very clearly waning more than it has after more than it did after World War II, and kind of these, I mean, that is like a real thing that, like, you know, violent gangs of you know, ruffians have at different times throughout history have kind of, you know, taken to the streets, and drug use has become rampant. And like, where is that, I guess, aggressive energy going to go? And, you know, when it's the turn towards like either, you know, far right fascism or neoliberalism or something like that energy gets harnessed. And as long as like the numbers, like the data goes down of how many people are arrested, it seems to the rest of the society as if like the violence is going down. So yeah, it's very interesting queuing it up that way, I think.
Yeah,
I think you're I think you're definitely right. That it's like anticipating this neoliberal turn towards like data-driven criminal justice. But I think it's also reacting to something that was like also happening at the time, which was like a move away from like there was a sentiment both, I think, definitely in America, I think in the UK too, like to try to move away from retributive justice towards like a more medicalized view of justice. And this is definitely, I think the movie and the book are both reacting to that too. Although I think in a kind of less direct, like a less obvious way than it might seem on the surface, but like it's definitely a subversive commentary on that trend too.
It also seems like it's you know, looking at both like clearly like the government in A Clockwork Orange, it seems like a Tory government. Like it's kind of like the I mean, there's the side of it that's like, all right, we need to get the data down. We just, by any means necessary, like we need to just kind of make it seem like this crime wave is going away, even if we don't have, like, even if nobody is actually, you know, cured in any real sense of the word, like we need to do whatever it takes to get these numbers down. But there's the other side of it throughout the movie where people are calling for more draconian measures within that government, being like, hey, like people need to not pay their debt. Well, I guess pay their debt, like be punished for what they've done. So there's like those two warring factions within it. But then it doesn't treat like the liberal line very well either, which is, you know, by the end of it, the guy who had just gotten assaulted, like in a wheelchair, like trying to get revenge and show like the you know, how evil this government is, still is, you know, incredibly reactive and kind of like it doesn't paint like clearly like him being like, oh well, everyone kind of comes here after the police beat them up, like you're a victim, like that kind of is the liberal line, which, you know, becomes incredibly reactive when reacting to this fascist turn.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, the liberal, I mean, we can save this for when we get to the punishment portion, but yeah, the so-called like liberal, like medicalized punishment is really retributive at every step of the way. Like it's
okay, yeah, so that's interesting. So yeah, they have so you see him do you know, the first version of the home invasion, pretending that there's been an accident. Then you kind of get a sense of what his life is like the rest of the time, to sort of get you out of the question of like sort of social determinants of crime. Like it turns out that he actually seems to have like a pretty, you know, I mean, whatever, they live in an apartment. There's reference to his mom working at a factory, but like, you know, still like there's like nobody's in any like horribly financially precarious situation there. Like it seems like his parents are gainfully employed. He's got a decent roof over his head, like etc. And there are some kind of attempts to rein him in through, you know, like he's already going to some kind of like, what do they call it? It's like not a reformatory school, but like he's already been penalized in some way, right? Like, well, like whatever kind of school that he's going to, it's like some sort of halfway something or other, you know, to because he's you know, he's gotten in trouble, you know, with the law, you know, repeatedly already, and his parents are kind of like farcically naive, you know, about it.
It seems like he's been to some kind of like juvenile detention facility at some point, because the social worker that comes in says, "Oh, we haven't seen you around the," I forget what he calls it, but he's like, "in a while," and he's like, "That means you're due to go back in." So it would seem like whatever juvenile detention that they have, or juvenile program that they have, he's kind of been in it and been out of it for a couple years.
And it's kind of a failure, because like he doesn't think that, you know, it reformed him at all. So you know, he's just like, "Oh, we'll be seeing you in prison soon," or, you know, it's kind of how
yes.
yeah.
That scene is so. I mean, also another thing to highlight about this movie is it's largely a comedy. Like that scene is like so comical. Like the guy is like, "Yeah," this was like very like sniveling and like, I mean, grabs his crotch and just like, it's so just exaggerated.
And then he drinks dinner water.
I just thought that's what school officials did in England. That's not right.
Wait, you didn't get defeated at home by somebody drinking dinner water?
Yeah.
That was my senior year, man.
But it also seems like everything in this world is incredibly sexualized. Like obviously the guy grabs his crotch and doesn't like think anything of it, but also like, you know, everything has dicks on it. Like everything is phallic in this world. Like even just like nobody really thinks anything of it. Like it's not like anyone's shocked by it at this point. Like it seems like both everybody's reaction to like violence and everybody's reaction to sex has been dulled down to the point where like they're walking through this sexualized world and nobody really pays attention to it anymore even.
Yeah. Again, I wonder how much the world is sexualized, how much this is just the way Alex is seen in the world. Like how much we're supposed to trust that, because it is just everything is just so exaggerated and over the top and like in your face. And like this feels like this could be the perspective of just a demented 15-year-old kid. Rather
That's not what England is like in general. Just everything.
I mean, maybe, I don't know.
I don't know. You've been over there.
Is that what I haven't been to England? Jen, tell us. Is that like?
I want to go to their milk bars.
half of everything is like incredibly boring and bureaucratic, and half of everything is over the top and extremely sexualized and like
dicks everywhere. Just
yeah, funny actually. Growing up in mid-Michigan, went over a couple times with friends to Windsor, right over the Detroit-Windsor border in Canada, and part of the appeal for that is that the legal drinking age is 2 years younger there, so so you could drink in bars in Windsor at 19. And I remember there was like an absinthe bar in Windsor, because that was also a thing back then. You couldn't get absinthe legally in the U.S. That was actually called Milk. Like I don't think they did all the other crazy Clockwork Orange stuff in it, but that was the bar.
And did you see dicks everywhere when you drank the absinthe? Is that what this is about?
We got you pulled on like the teat of the statue, and the absinthe came out of the fountain.
No, it was poured by bartenders. Like if they were going to call it milk, they really should have gone for the whole thing.
It only costs like a nickel.
So I guess one of the strangest things in this movie is that Alex is preoccupied with Ludwig van Beethoven, and especially the Ninth Symphony. And to Ryan's point, I guess, about how much of this world is really Alex's, like what he's going through mentally when he listens to the Ninth Symphony in this scene, like. I that's honestly one of my favorite scenes when he's listening to it, and then there's like the four Jesuses that are like doing like the can for whatever, and like just the angles are like it almost seems like they're dancing to the
crotch.
Yeah, but then he's also like watching these scenes of violence in his head, like explosions and like death and all this thing, and so like Ludwig's like Beethoven, well, he calls him Ludwig van throughout it, which I think is really funny. But he like these scenes of death and destruction are what he imagines.
Which is really weird, because it takes me back every single time I watch that scene to watching Keith Olbermann in the aughts, because not only does he use Beethoven's Ninth as like his little song, but he also would have like scenes of violence from Iraq. So it was just very comforting to watch that scene.
So I was just gonna say the thing that, have you all seen The Professional? With
yes.
Gary Oldman? that's what it makes me think of, is because Gary Oldman's character, ultra villain, is also like super obsessed with Beethoven, and like he has the headphones on.
And then he was Beethoven.
Yeah, that's true.
Coincidence?
Yeah. So there's
which Immortal Beloved, a great film.
Inherent to Beethoven. We should keep that away from kids.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the takeaway from this movie. Don't let children
Nope.
listen to Beethoven.
No.
Yeah, I gotta say, by the way, what I really miss is Keith Olbermann's ESPN show. I'm being serious about that because, like, I remember watching him on NBC way back when, and like I found his like whole persona, like the worst person in the world, like segment, all that stuff, super entertaining. Like the politics were kind of dumb and got dumber, like as it progressed. But I liked the Olbermann shtick. So then when he was like briefly on ESPN, I mean, I assume he's the hardest person in the world to work with because he has, he never seems to last like more than 6 weeks in any gig. But but like when he was on ESPN, he was doing like the whole Olbermann shtick, and it was just as entertaining. But it was about sports instead of politics, and I also liked that he was an ESPN commentator who seemed to be as interested in like sort of going after the decisions of teams and owners, as he was in talking about the sort of morality of players, and also I remember he did a bunch of stuff about like student athletes not being able to to give out their autograph for money and stuff like that, which so I enjoyed all of that. So anyway, off topic, but
yeah, Trump seemed to have really broken.
Olbermann, that's the position.
Trump seemed to have really broken his brain, like more than, I mean, I don't know. I feel like during that early 2016 time period, there was a rush. I mean, Bill Maher did it too, like the rush to be like the tough liberal, which are two things that are never going to go together. And I hope that liberals stop trying to do that, because like the tough swearing liberal that's like, listen, we need to really come down hard on this, like this whole Trump thing, and it's like, no, you don't. Like, shut the fuck up. You're not.
Yeah,
you're never gonna out a Republican. Yeah.
His moment of politics was much earlier. Was it during the Bush administration, and like after the Bush administration, he kind of was useless. So,
Yeah.
But anyway, much over to a much less cursed subject, A Clockwork Orange. So there's been like this kind of power struggle, and you see it kind of take place when they're at the milk bar, and he stops Dim, who's like the dumbest of the four droogs from like this woman is singing along to Beethoven. He stops him from stopping her performance. And so after pretending that he's sick and sleeping the entire day to sleep off whatever they've done the night before, the three of his droogs that are in his kind of like street gang appear at his house, and they're all sitting in the lobby, which weirdly enough, the lobby of his apartment seems to look a lot like a stage as well. Like there's this large like stage tree, and like these decorations, and obviously there's like the like Roman style paintings that people have painted over with sexualized commentary and stuff. So they're all sitting down there, and the three of them kind of stage a coup and push off his leadership because they want to make more money, and he's not letting them make enough money. And so it's kind of like this alpha dog mentality that he's kind of pushed off the top of the leadership, and they go instead for like they want to make the big money, as they say.
Well, you did skip over the all in out and out.
Yeah.
Which interesting thing about the book, that was supposed to be like two 10-year-old girls in the book. So if you're thinking about reading the book, and there's your warning right there. It gets I have not actually read it myself. I've been looking for an audiobook of it, but there's
one on Scribd. There's one on if you pay the $10. So, but the guy does like a Cockney accent the whole time, and I found it kind of hard to listen to because it sounded like he was doing like like I said, I'm looking for an audiobook because I don't think I could actually read it without my eyes like
having to reread every single paragraph 5 times, and it just took me forever. And I'm a slow enough reader as it is, so just do the audiobook. But the book itself is something that I'm just putting out there. You might not necessarily want to read, although there is a extra chapter that was not in the American version, which Kubrick would have had access to. So it stops where the American version stops, and then the book goes on with this extra chapter of like this epilogue. Yeah. But we'll get there at the end. I could tell you about that because I watched a video.
I've heard about it. I haven't read the book, but I've heard about the extra last chapter, which it sounds like just ruins the story.
It changes the meaning of it because one of the things whenever they go to the writer's house, he actually reads what the writer's writing about, and his the book title is A Clockwork Orange, and it's about is a person can a person be oh god, I'm going to screw this up here. Can they be actually like a fully realized person if they, like a computer, are prevented from doing certain things? So it raises the question right there at the very beginning of the book, like the whole thing of the underlying thing of the story. So they end up being a little bit different from what I understand, because of this extra chapter, and because of a few minor things. Alex is less likable in the book. But, in a movie, you do want your main character to be likable, and who's more likable than Malcolm McDowell?
Yeah, yeah.
Was the likability?
You better have somebody really likable. I mean, if you're gonna portray like one of the most despicable people who's ever been like a main character in a movie.
And he went on to kill Kirk, so he's bad.
Oh, fair enough.
I guess Star Trek is too much for Jen.
Yeah. She walks out whenever Star Trek is brought up. So.
I'm so sorry about that.
It's the whole thing.
My bad. I'll be aware next time.
No, that was a joke. I've watched Star Trek movies with Jen.
No, you were talking about Star Trek 2 on Friday, so.
Yeah, that's right. Which what we were talking about it, in the connection there, was about utilitarianism, which is also a big I think thing in this movie, thinking about thinking about like theories of punishment and what it's saying about that, which Ryan kind of alluded to earlier, right? So just to skip ahead in the plot a little bit, they do, after there's kind of a mutiny within the ranks of his gang, and he suppresses it with predictable brutality. Then they go to do another home invasion, like he likes to do. But he's playing the hits too much. He's repeating himself more than he should. And now the person whose home is being invaded recognizes it from the newspaper account of the previous home invasion and calls the cops. Meanwhile, his droogs have betrayed him. And they kind of leave him to abandon him to be arrested, which is what then happens.
It was the milk that really did him in.
It blinded him.
Yeah.
You have the sort of luridly violent depictions of violent in a different way, depictions of prison bureaucracy that we've kind of already alluded to, and it is great, by the way, right? That this spawn of Satan, character, with no hesitation whatsoever, is asked about religious affiliations. Oh, CV, right? Church of England, because it's a whatever. It's an identity. It's not a it's not a belief. But while in prison, he immediately realizes that his best shot at all good things coming to him in prison is to suck up to the prison authorities whatever way he can, which means sucking up to the prison chaplain. So
who also is weirdly sexual when he takes them aside and he's like, "Oh, I know of the urges that beset young men." Like,
well, which goes along with the thing earlier from like the juvie officer or whatever, you know, who assaults him, you know, in bed. Like again, you know, I just assumed that was a British thing, you know, all like officials related to, you know, like school officials, you know, priest, whatever, you know, they're all pederasts. That's just the deal. But
you mean they're not?
What's that?
They're not?
You know, we act like you know, the whole pedophile thing is a Catholic thing because they're not allowed to get married, but this movie kind of proves that it's, you know, the Church of England is just as likely to get involved in that too, even though, you know, they're perfectly allowed to get married and everything.
Yeah, it's just institutions, no you know, hierarchical institutions without a lot of checks. But yeah, so right, officials are constantly coming on to him in this movie, which, although again that does go to Ryan's theory, this could just be how he sees the world.
Yeah. From his perspective, everyone wants to fuck everyone, which is kind of a 15-year-old perspective of the world.
Fair enough.
When I tell you, oh my brothers, everybody was trying to get the old in out.
One of the interesting things too about the book, apparently the prison is supposed to be overcrowded, which is not at all you know, touched on in the film. So they
do mention it. They mention it. Prison overcrowding.
Well, there's supposed to be 4 prisoners in a cell in the book, and they shove a 5th one in there, and which nobody liked the 5th guy, and so they murder him. And you know, Alex DeLarge gets you know, in trouble for murdering this guy and ends up going off to, you know, and that's how he got picked for the treatment, as opposed to what actually happened in the film. So they did change that. It was
just his charm.
Yeah. Which exactly, again, it's Alex's view of it, but that like they just recognized what a bold young man he was, and
he is Malcolm McDowell. Who are you gonna pick?
He's enterprising. He's you know, he's a hard worker.
Yeah, exactly. But as yeah, so he's and like the prison church scene is fantastic because it's done so well that like you have this like room full of Alexes who are reacting to the sermon exactly the way that you'd think that Alex would react to it.
Yeah.
And then, you know, and then like the sort of ludicrous over the top prison guard is yelling at them, and it's a whole thing. And then the camera pans around. You see Alex is not only not one of the people jeering, but he is the I don't even know what you call him, but he's the attendant, you know, who's you know,
projector.
who's working the projector, you know, and he's
assistant to the prison chaplain, I think.
And then later you see him you see him reading the Bible, which is a fantastic scene because, of course, when he's reading the Bible, he imagines himself as one of the Roman centurions lashing Jesus.
Yeah, and that goes back to kind of the earlier part where he's listening to the Ninth Symphony and he's imagining like these scenes of violence happening before him. Like he seamlessly kind of puts his own perspective into all of these different things. But yeah, like his term that like he sees himself as like, he's like, oh, I love the part where everyone's beating the shit out of each other in that part of the Bible, but I hate the part where it becomes all you know, like
he doesn't like the stuff about love and peace, but he likes all the bloodshed in the Old Testament. and he perks up again in the New Testament, you know, when it goes when Jesus is being scoured and crucified, you know, like he likes that. Which of course goes to the point about how he is like a purely malevolent person, and which is important, you know, because for to make it a perfect case for the treatment. So he gets selected for the Ludovico method treatment because It's well, sure, because of his charm, but also they do reference the prison overcrowding and the conversation between the Minister of Interior and like the guard and governor of the prison. But that's it's just happens very quickly.
They tell, don't show.
Yeah.
Well, he says something really interesting. He says, not only are the prisons overcrowded with criminals in this world, like that they have to start making way for political prisoners, rather than like.
Exactly. He says very soon prisons are too crowded. Very soon we'll need all this prison space for political prisoners. So these common criminals, we got to find a way to let them back out. Yeah, which is fantastic. Yeah, and then which
again is kind of a Thatcherite mentality. You know what I mean? Like not only do we have to kind of get the actual data of the numbers, like the data driven, like we have to get the numbers in the prisons down, but also we have to reassign like these brutal like paramilitary operations on the street to like being within the bureaucracy. Like it all kind of like the violent elements of society.
And the thing that's the most like actually fascist about all of that, like as opposed to just like right-wing authoritarian, but like really classically fascist, is the fact that they rehired all the droogs as cops.
I think it was Howard Zinn who said they recruit the police from the criminal class.
Yeah. But I mean, certainly, like if you think about like the fascists in Italy or the Nazis in Germany, I mean, like those aren't basically just like right-wing street gangs, who are being fused with like normal state power. So you get then and at the treatment, which is like aversion therapy, right, which is actually also kind of funny with some of the other things we talked about, because it's like the sort of thing, that's like the conversion therapy thing. You're gonna like get negative associations, and so that Alex will feel cripplingly sick to his stomach every time he has. Now we're doing this with visual effects. Ryan was like
a hologram
right now.
Yeah, this is all a green screen.
Yeah, you could actually see Ben pass through Ryan sometimes.
Yeah. When we screwed up, and it's like his hand passes through my arm or something. It's like, oh wait, whoops, just ruined the illusion. But in and then, of course, the key plot detail is that the aversion therapy accidentally also the same way that it makes him have this revulsion to sex and violence, it also gives him this violent revulsion to his favorite piece of music, the Ninth, Ludwig van, which is the point where he starts screaming and telling them, not to, because he can live with everything else, but he can't live without his Beethoven's Ninth Symphony.
It can't be helped. But here's your punishment. The doctors actually seem to feel a little bad about it. It's like, well, okay, here's your punishment.
Perhaps this is where the punishment element comes in.
The governor will be pleased.
Exactly. And then then you see like most of the rest of the movie is the consequences of him being punished in this way, which is basically that he is completely powerless and defenseless against everybody now.
Yeah.
And then what's interesting too is like before, remember I mentioned how everything was like done with like symmetrical shooting, and now all of a sudden everything's off kilter. You're getting Dutch angles, you're getting other angles. The moment when the police show up, they actually do film it symmetrically again, and then everything stops being symmetrical after that. So just kind of a fascinating way that they that I love how they unstabilized it when it's supposed to be in what we think of as normal.
Yeah. Yeah, I do want. I think that's a great observation. I also want to pause for a second before we get to the post punishment scene. There's this great scene where they do the demonstration with him, and then like you have the doctor saying, you know, it's all about the consequences, and you have the chaplain saying, but he's not free if he can't choose, if he can't make a moral choice. And I love it on two levels. On the surface level, it's like, oh, here's just like a classic presentation of like these two rival views of punishment between like the consequentialist view and this like retributive view. But I think he's actually subverting that whole debate because the priest the whole time, like when the priest or the chaplain or whatever he is, when he's giving the sermon earlier, he's lecturing them about punishment. He's saying like, you don't understand the pain that's in store for you if you keep being the way that you are. So the only thing that's changed is that the pain has been internalized instead of coming from an external source. But they actually haven't changed his moral character at all. He still wants to do all the bad things. It's just now he's being punished. Mm-hmm. But instead of the punishment being a prison, the punishment is physical pain.
Which is that chapter in that book that the writer was working on in the book version of Clockwork Organge.
Yeah, well, yeah, I thought it was super. Yeah, interesting that the guy was a writer. Like he sort of seemed like as that's Anthony Burgess is sort of picturing himself as this
Stephen Kinging himself in.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think that point about the priest is super interesting. So just to kind of take a step back here, like two different ways of thinking about punishment are the consequentialist, like the utilitarian way, which is that the purpose of criminal punishment is to bring about good consequences, keep everybody safe. Whether that's by prevention, persons in prison or they've been executed so they can't commit any more crimes, or deterrence, other people see what's happened to them, or rehabilitation. That they when they get out, they won't do things like this again. And then the other way is retributive. So you're being punished because you deserve to be punished. You should have, as the lodger says in the scene where he tries to go back to his parents' apartment. You've caused pain to others. It's only right that that you have great pain caused to you, and that is interesting. So oftentimes like the sort of goofy cartoonish example, just to kind of set this up for students, I'll use that comes from my friend Mark, is you imagine that like you find Hitler on the moon and he's...
I saw that movie.
But he's alone there, right? There's nobody else to find out what happens to him, right? If you kill Hitler on the moon, there's no... nobody will learn anything from it. No like societal benefits will come about. Nobody's ever going to find out about it. It's just the two of you up there. But should you just leave him there to, he's got a garden, he's gone back to his art, maybe he reads some history books about the Nazi years to cheer himself up, so should you leave him to that fate, or would it be right to kill Hitler on the moon, which, like I said, a very simplified, example, but it sort of brings about the point. And I really like Ryan's point that the way that the priest sort of wants to have it both ways, right?
Yeah,
because he wants to scare the kids straight, right? So it's like, don't try to without even just make them do the right thing for fear of punishment.
He's not actually trying to change their characters at all. He's just trying to scare them into doing the right thing for fear of pain. And that's literally exactly what the scientists have done. They've just managed to internalize it instead of making it an external threat. So on the surface, there's this pretense of a conflict between the retributive and the utilitarian justifications, but actually the scientists are doing exactly what the priest did. And yeah, like I said, the priest wants to have it both ways because he's totally, what he was saying in the sermon is what the scientists do. But then he's like, oh, wait a second, though. I don't like that. Yeah.
So then, throughout much of the rest of the movie, we see what this does to Alex, this form of
baby Hitler, would you? I need to know.
And crazy.
Hell yeah, I would.
Even if he was really.
Oh God! Can we get the
You
big
gotta-
response to this question too?
Gotta
Yeah.
step up, man. I mean, that would be.
So this is
Probably.
Jeb Bush famously signaling his willingness to travel back in time and kill baby Hitler.
Bold stance.
Bold stance. Well,
You got it. You got to do it. You got to kill baby Hitler.
I mean, look, you have any idea how many Iraqi babies the Bush family has killed, and none of them were even Hitler. You know, like that's of course Jeb's comfortable with this. So you see what this has done to him, which is basically it leaves him powerless before everybody. His parents have rented out his room to a lodger, and the lodger is just some dweeb. But even he is able to fuck with Alex, and Alex can't do anything. He tries to hit him, and he can't. The very like powerless old homeless man to earlier in the movie, he beat half to death. Is now able to violently threaten him when he recognizes him. Certainly the very same insubordinate droogs who he was able to like really savagely discipline early in the movie helps that they're now cops, but even if they hadn't been, like they're able to brutalize him. And even at the end, the writer is able to exact his revenge on Alex. Because he's powerless before all these people, and
With the help of Darth Vader.
Yes,
That's right. The help of that's right.
the actor who's in the Darth Vader suit. Yeah. So
I knew that guy looked. I knew that guy looked familiar somehow. I just
You can tell by his movements. Like
I honestly thought the first time I watched, I thought Woody Allen and Arnold Schwarzenegger had a child.
So there's a political twist at the end of the movie, and I do still want to talk about that. But first, because Jen had to cut out. I think there's a student communication had to deal with. But guess who we do have? Oh, anybody guess? Anybody know who it's going to be?
Hey,
Gail.
it's Jennifer Burgess.
You can't see your Vulcan ears.
Jennifer,
Well,
please.
I have to hear you. There's a conflict of interest right now, so I had to go with the headphones over the Vulcan ears. But
Will you please tell us how this movie supports the moon landing conspiracy theory?
I thought you guys were doing a great job already. I mean, you're halfway there. Just connect the dots. I mean, there are some like obviously like you're talking about like the fascistic themes. There's also there's like a lot of little funny visual references that are totally intended. Where when the Droogs, who are now police officers, his former like gang members they find him and they try to drown him in the trough. There's a scene where the three of them are all lined up. They have Alex in the middle of them and they're all arm in arm and they're like pulling him to the trough. And you can see on both of the Droogs' shoulders their officer IDs. And one of them is 665 and then the other one is 667. Meaning Alex, who's in the middle, would presumably be 666.
666. The mark of any conspiracy theory, as we all know.
Yeah, and we all know it's on the dark side of the moon. It's the Nazis. Didn't you see the movie like 10 years ago?
Iron Sky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, thanks for having me on. This is fun.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
I learned from you that as producer in there, you can change everybody else's names and handles.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I only got Jennifer Burgess and Dr. Ludovico in the iterations of Kale's name. Yeah. By the way, we should say, just in case anybody missed this, Jeb's stance is controversial within the American right because Ben Shapiro made a statement at an anti-abortion rally that, of course, from a conservative perspective, you can't kill baby Hitler because baby Hitler is a baby. So you can't do that.
That's a
I
good
missed
point.
that one.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
he said that. That sounds like a joke, but that actually was.
Those are literal Ben Shapiro words.
Might be why he lost.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Jeb
No.
alienated the base, with his killing baby Hitler position. My long-standing position, by the way, is I really want to have a third position in the killing baby Hitler debate between kill baby Hitler and let baby Hitler grow up to be Hitler. That I want to see a sitcom about time travelers kidnapping baby Hitler and then bringing him back to the present to be raised by some nice Jewish family.
Yeah.
But then it all happens anyways because he's just angry at his parents.
Yeah.
I mean, but wouldn't
The
the
sitcom, of course, would be called Raising Hitler. But what were you saying?
that's the correct answer, but my extremely lame ass nerdy ass answer would be that we would just hope that the socialist revolution in Germany actually succeeds between 1918 and 1923, and then Hitler grows up in a socialist world where fascistic politics really don't have any place, and he never, even if he goes fascist, he never has any traction. So that's the.
Or he's so happy that he just keeps painting and everything's great.
I don't know. I like the sitcom. I would if I could play God, I would probably go for the sitcom over like socialism winning in the 19 teens.
Honestly, with one major art deal, I feel like you could neutralize Hitler because if his painting really took off, I feel like there isn't the impotent rage as much there of like a man who's been cast out of society. So like if there's I feel like artistically successful Hitler really like maximizing his potential might neutralize everything from kind of happening.
Wow. Fair enough. Speaking of fascism, at the end of Clockwork Orange, so it turns out that the writer, I don't know. I will say when Glenn Greenwald came on the first time, he pointed out there's actually there actually was like a structurally similar dilemma a couple of years ago for people who worked at the hospital when Bolsonaro was stabbed, but although also maybe one that shows the limits of this kind of thing in the real world, because I'm sure that if he had died, one of his like super fascist sons could have just taken up the mantle, but in any
right, it is kind of ultimately like a fairly liberal premise of just like if you just get rid of the bad guy, then history is entirely different. And I think sometimes that it's kind of true because of course sometimes certain important
there are
people,
individuals who really are so important to the flow of events that kind of checks out. But like the impulse to always think that that's the case is definitely
right.
Yeah.
Well, and just that like there's obviously when Hitler comes about or when Bolsonaro comes about, like there are millions of other people who agree with these politics too. So like it's not that they themselves are the catalysts. That I mean, by definition, they're reactionaries. So they're reacting to these other social forces, which is important to Clockwork Orange because it is just kind of all about this question of like, where does the individual fit into a failing social system? And that's actually something that Ryan was saying earlier, is that even Forrest, you really should lean into it if you can. But to Ryan's point, so Ryan was saying, perhaps the whole movie is just it's just Alex's version of the world. We're just seeing it all through his perspective. And even if that's true, which some of that I think is right. I don't think everything in the movie is just his interpretation, but even if it is true, then it reflects the fact that he lives in an ultra-violent, sexualized society that socialized him to be like that.
Yeah, I
So,
think that's right, for sure. Yeah.
which is kind of which is where the kind of I guess the point of everything kind of failing for him comes in, because you know what I mean, like it's not like there's a path from like, oh well, his upbringing wasn't good,
Yeah, right.
like to like, oh well, then he became violent. It's like his upbringing was fine, but all of these social forces have failed him, and you know they never
Yeah,
obviously.
his upbringing was fine at a micro level. He's just raised in a horrifying society.
Yeah.
No, that's
like the easy answer is kind of evading them is what leads to like these kind of like slap shot solutions, I guess, because everybody wants to throw together this like easy solution to fix this, because at all levels, like institutionally, they've failed to figure out even the beginning of how to fix this.
Yeah. No, that seems absolutely.
So I don't know if we've kind of finished the full plot summary, but
so almost right. So like the last thing with the plot is just the twist at the end, right? So the writer is part of some sort of scheme to bring down this terrible half fascist conservative government. And the plan seems to be that if they can sort of interview Alex and he'll talk about how he's like almost to the brink of suicide, then they actually drive him to suicide. That'll have that effect. But he doesn't, he jumps, but he doesn't die. And then then it seems to be the case that they've done something in the hospital. This is a little vague, but there's a suggestion of brain surgery that somehow reverses the Ludovico treatment. And meanwhile, the writer has been put in prison. We know that, fulfilling what was said earlier in the movie about freeing up cells for political prisoners. And then what's the like it all seems very ominous, and I feel like I have a half an idea, but I mean like what's the big plan for how the this like half fascist Tory government is going to use Alex at the end, like assuming the reliability of the narration.
Well, so this is actually again, and I'm not, this is not my original understanding of the movie. I'm picking this off from other people as well, but I think there's a compelling film analysis that says that the Ludovico technique never worked from the very beginning. That when Alex is in the correctional facility, he essentially offers himself up for the treatment, that he going out of his way to suck up to the elites in the institution, that when they're all lined up outside, he's the one who speaks up and again, essentially trying to get their attention the whole time so that he can then enter into this thing. And it ultimately serves both of their interests, because Alex is looking at basically being stuck in prison the rest of his life. And the correctional officers, the bureaucrats who work there, of course, like you're saying, like their main interest right now is we need to be bringing in political prisoners. We need to free up all these criminals. So wouldn't it be great if we could just get rid of the criminals by having a process to do that? And Alex is an extremely willing individual who's willing to go along with this treatment and kind of play the part in a way. And as Forrest was saying earlier, I mean, so much of this movie is him kind of acting very theatrical. There's multiple rapes that have happened that have theatrical elements to them. He's in costume for the first half of the movie. And then the thing is that, okay, so if that's true, then how do we know that it hasn't worked? I think you can see multiple points throughout the end of the movie where he does in fact have violent impulses and then chooses not to act on them. So for instance, when he first goes home, he does, if I'm remembering correctly, which I'm going to be totally honest, I haven't seen this movie in a couple of years, but I'm pretty sure that he does I know.
No,
as
he
impromptu.
does. Like the suggestion is that he's like, like he takes his fist back to punch the guy, and then
So
because
that's after he does a fake out against his dad. That there is an initial kind of fake punch that he throws at his dad. When his dad's
and he's fine. He's fine with that. There's no like sense of nausea when he's like, "Oh, hi, Dad!" Like, and then he's like,
yeah.
So I mean, you could read that as just because he never intended to actually do it, so it wasn't enough to trigger the Ludovico.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean,
because
that's
it
how I
seemed
read
more
it.
like it was a power play rather than like he's trying to show power over his parents rather than trying to actually do violence to his parents.
So okay, well, so there's more evidence than just this, but I do think because when he is talking to his dad, he does have a clenched fist. Like he's clearly frustrated in that moment, and he doesn't get sick until the travelers in the room or the lodger rather is in the room with them, and so that's where I think you could plausibly say like it becomes an act where he does like the fake punch, or he goes for a punch. I'm saying I think it's a fake punch. And then basically acts sick in that moment. Later on, I think the most important piece of evidence, honestly, for this is when he's taken back in to the house of the writer. Later on, he's taking a bath upstairs, and he's it's funny. There's like part of like the visual evidence is there's like a sponge over his crotch and that, and it's like there's a similar kind of look to how he looked when he was in the house earlier in the costume assaulting the couple. But he's singing, or he's humming Singing in the Rain. And he does this motion, he like punches the side of the tub several times at the same moments in the song where he kicks the writer earlier. That there's like this parallel motion, this parallel action that he's clearly thinking about. He has a towel over his face, which is similar to the mask earlier. The towel and the sponge are kind of mirroring his earlier costume. And he's clearly thinking about that moment because of the song and the actual like hitting the side of the tub at the same moments that he kicked the writer. I don't know. I mean, there's other little pieces here and there, but I think
he's definitely like for sure he's like daydreaming about doing that. Like,
absolutely. I mean, for me, that speaks to the fact that the Ludovico technique did not change his character in the slightest, which like kind of subverts the whole dialogue between the scientist and the chaplain. Because he still is choosing to be this person. He still wants to act this way. It's just the pain that's been internalized instead of coming from God.
Right.
Yeah, I think also like to me, I always read it as like his subconscious is he wants to get caught. He wants to get credit for doing all this stuff because like up until that point, he hadn't been given credit for it.
Yeah, I know that's absolutely right. Yeah, that's also. I mean, because he's singing the song out loud, like, and clearly like very loudly. So it seems like he wants the writer to discover. Maybe I could speak to Kills.
I mean, maybe it's subconscious that he wants to get caught and wants this too. Like
it also seems
he
like
wants the writer to recognize that he's there.
he's kind of like attracted to the fact that he's getting away with it. Like the fact that like there's no way this guy really recognizes me. I was wearing a mask. Like he thinks that he's kind of gotten away with the violence that he put this writer through.
So therefore, I just because even if it's an unconscious reaction, maybe it is, but the Ludovico technique is not saying we're only going to affect your active conscious mind. It's going to affect your unconscious, so that when you actually try to act on something and be violent, it's going to like kick in, and you're not going to be able to act violently anymore. So even if it is an unconscious action or series of actions of him sitting in the tub singing the song and banging against the side of the bathtub, which I agree that I think he does see the writer as like a total like dupe, that he's one more person that he's gotten over on, just in the same way that he's kind of opportunistically gotten over on a number of other people throughout the movie. I think it's I don't know, again, I think it's evidence that the technique didn't work. that being said, obviously there is the ending where the writer plays Beethoven. They play the ninth. Yeah, they play the ninth, and he does end up jumping out the window, which I don't fully understand. So I'm having trouble kind of reconciling these things. That I think there's evidence to say that the technique doesn't work, but then I don't have a good explanation for why he then still tries to kill himself.
Yeah, in that scene, it definitely looks like it works. I mean,
Right.
for whose sake would he be faking the whole?
Yeah, and I'm also not sure like it works earlier on because like when the crowd of like when the homeless people are assailing, are surrounding him and starting to beat him up, like it doesn't seem like at that point, as far as he knows, it's just him and them
Right.
there, so like I think he could have fought back, without there being any problem.
He definitely, I mean, also, so, right, because I think some of this, when he goes back to his parents' house, he's basically begging them to take him back, that he wants to move back in. And so it would, again, be in his interest to, in that moment.
Yeah, in that case, I could see why he would fake it, with the homeless people and I mean, and maybe with like the ex-troops, who are now cops, I could see why he would fake it. Maybe, right? Although that seemed to get very close to killing him. So I think that one's pretty borderline.
Yeah, I think my interpretation is that it worked, but like it didn't change who he was, and that was kind of what the argument was about the from the priest. Because he's not choosing to not to be violent. He's being forced to be not violent, which again, if I recall from what I've seen of that video about the book, is what the book was trying to say about it in the chapter the writer was writing.
Right, but so then what so Andy, what do you think it means for the technique to work?
Well, I mean,
it's kind of that surface level thing that unites both liberals and conservatives, like that, like with The Wire, which reminded. I don't know about Thatcher's England using wanting to juke the stats, but I do know juking the stats is from The Wire. That was where they were trying to make the basically the crime rates look like they've been dropping, so it looks like their broken window policing is working, more or less.
Yeah, well, there's the connection.
I think just on like a really like straightforward literal level, I think I thought what it meant for the treatment to work was certainly not that he wouldn't have the desires anymore, but just that he wouldn't be able to act on the desires.
Yeah, the nausea would overwhelm him.
So like even though he's able to he's not able to commit these acts of violence, he's still deep down in his soul, which is why the priest
he still wants to, which you even see in the scene in the prison where they're demonstrating it, because
and that's like it's like the whole thing about sin and religion. It's like it's not just about your actions, it's about your thoughts too, and that's kind of why the minister guy was kind of arguing that.
On the surface, it's about this conflict between like free will and consequences, but the thing is, his will isn't changed at all. His thoughts aren't changed at all by the technique. Like, he still wants to do all the bad things. He still wants to grab the woman. He still wants to punch the guy renting. So it's really just another version of the retributive system. But again, the pain is just now internalized instead of coming from the prison.
It renders him impotent. Like, it's the impotence of an entire generation of people who might be running around. I mean, either they're absorbed into the state, as those two cops are, or the criminals that get caught are rendered impotent. Like, they no longer have the ability to be sexual and to be violent. Like, they're just kind of rendered into the state of
they could be sexual.
I mean, I will say the one thing that's interesting about this, like thinking about what the treatment's supposed to do, is like for like us kind of trying to figure out, okay, but what about the music, right? Because like that's not a matter of him doing anything, right? That's just like that, you know, like that's experience it. So you
Right.
think that would be more like him fantasizing about stuff that he can clearly, which he can clearly still do. But I don't know, maybe just listening to the music is so fulfilling for him. That would be the equivalent of hitting someone or having sex or any of these other things that he's not allowed to do now.
It also
Right.
seems like the wires are crossed for him, like the beauty of the world. Like he's watching the scenes of ultra violence that are happening on screen, and he's saying like, this is beautiful. Like this is truly like the world. Like this is one of the beautiful things in life, is beating the shit out of somebody until the blood comes out. Like, and then for him also, for whatever reason, like listening to Beethoven is the beauty of the world. So like these things for him that are completely warped and malevolent are kind of wrapped up in the same like earthly beauty, like his connection to the earth that he inhabits. You know what I mean? And so they're kind of taking away his ability to appreciate that beauty in all meaningful ways, and kind of rendering him into like this I don't know, like I mean, this impotent being, really. Like I think that they're trying to paper over the violence with an easy solution, and the point is, throughout this whole movie, is that there is no easy solution to it. The state has failed in all meaningful ways to stop this violence from happening, and the only thing left for them is like this easy political victory, where it's like, oh well, you know, these people just can't be violent anymore because they're going to throw up if they are. Like,
So I'm also, again, I don't want to, you know, I want to go to everybody for final thoughts in a minute, but I mean, like I don't want to let this get completely lost. So I like the Ludovico doesn't work conspiracy theory. I don't think I buy it, but I like it. But
It's not a conspiracy. There's only one person on this stream that's agreeing with it, so it's not a conspiracy.
It's not a conspiracy if it's real.
Right. Thank you.
Come on.
yeah, look, I mean, if Kubrick did fake the moon landing, that's just a thing that happened. That's just a thing that happened theory. Come on, guys.
Yeah.
We've got a Ludovico truther on our hands.
Which would, by the way, like if everything read straightforwardly in this movie existed, British society would totally include Ludovico truthers. That would absolutely be it.
That's going to be a T-shirt, Ludovico Truther.
I'll get on that.
Could be. Yeah, cash in on that one, Ben.
I also want to say, before we close this out, like in terms of the ending, I think that it really is one of the most brutal takedowns of like liberalism, I guess, like rational liberalism of all time, because, you know, the writer, his big plan is like, oh, if we expose this, if we cause him to commit suicide, and of course it's tied up in his own notions of revenge, but like if we cause him to commit suicide and everybody suddenly knows that the Ludovico technique is this brutal thing, everyone will oppose it. Like in his mind, the biggest, you know, it's not like a takedown of the state that totally like realigns everything. It's just like, oh, if people know this is happening, they'll suddenly oppose it. Or like the smart people in society will suddenly oppose it. And it's like, it's the most impotent form of liberalism. You know what I mean? Like even the most radical, like, person that they
just like Joe Biden, everything will go back to normal.
Yeah. Well, it really does feel. I mean, actually, like it is funny. Like what it reminded me of was what Matt Taibbi talks about in Hate Inc. I think Hate Inc. is the one. It might have been his previous book, but anyway, one of Matt Taibbi's books. He talks about how there'd be this like phrase, this like media phrase, like this sort of death spiral, I think it was, which is when there's some scandal and like the politician sort of tries to like apologize and it doesn't work, and they have and they end up just getting in deeper and deeper, and like that eventually they have to drop out. And people kept thinking the spiral was happening with Trump, and it just never did, right? You know, like just because he just didn't give a fuck, it didn't matter, right? You know, it's like they just post through it, you know. So and it did seem kind of like that. I mean, it sort of seemed like, I don't know. I mean, it was like that whatever, like pair of these people, the writer and his friends, you know, were like whatever pair of FBI agents thinking that like Russiagate was going to like bring down Trump, you know. Like it's like, no, we got him, right? You know, it's like, no, you don't. It's not going to.
And would you believe it? Oh, my brothers, they continue to post through it.
Exactly. So before we do final thoughts, though, like just reading the movie straightforwardly and assuming that it does work and assuming that it was reversed somehow at the end, like I kind of realized on this rewatch that I didn't completely understand what the plan was for how the government was going to use Alex. I mean, like, what are we supposed to understand there?
I think it's a media thing, personally.
Yeah, the
I just
extra
think that,
chapter of the
I mean, no,
Yeah.
go.
Andy, go for it.
No, I was just going to say the extra chapter of the book, the one that wasn't published in America until like 1987, if I remember correctly. Basically, Alex just goes back to his life, reforms his gang with a bunch of new young guys, and then excuse me, and then gets bored. He just kind of realizes, like, I'm starting to age out of this. I think I want to become a musician. I think I want to have children, and just sits at the bar and drinks, apparently, and that's what I got from that video about what is the difference between the book and the movie.
No,
But it kind of kind of
free will.
yeah. No, I get that, but like at the end of the movie, like what are they suggesting? Is the idea just that it's a deal that whereby they'll restore to his ability to do ultra violence, and in exchange he'll like talk to the media the way that the government wants him to? Is that it?
That's what I got from it. I mean, I think one thing that this movie did really, really well, and I think this is a thing of British society, that British society kind of the tabloidization of the media happened sooner than with our society, because I think in the 80s really is when our tabloids, like late 70s and 80s, are when our tabloids kind of picked up. But in England it happened sooner, and throughout the movie you can see these tabloid headlines like "cat killer freed" or whatever, and or you know what I mean. So I think,
including, I should mention, I think Taibbi also talks about this and like extremely sensationalized and exaggerated stuff about youth gang violence that may have helped to inspire this movie. But yeah.
Well, but the tabloid stuff doesn't really take off in the UK until later, though. It really is with Joyce McKinney at the end of the 70s, which there's a really good documentary by Errol Morris on that called Tabloid that people should watch. It's just one of the best documentaries ever, because Errol Morris is one of the best ever. But so I don't know if it's tabloid so much as I do buy the other thing you're saying. I do think it's essentially the government doesn't really give a shit about what is happening in these people's minds. That I think they've found in Alex somewhat, even whether or not you think the Ludovico technique has worked or not. I think it is true that Alex has kind of offered himself up for the technique at first, and ultimately at the end, it seems like he's willing to go along with whatever the next phase of the plan is, and that it's the government is again. This is not my politics, but Kubrick's politics, I think, of just like the government is just there to have some kind of has to do something with kind of like the lumpen proletariat or like the more broader kind of surplus population. But beyond that, it's like they don't really care how they do it. It's the society has its own kind of I think I preface it because I think Kubrick is maybe a little bit more kind of statist in the sense that I think he thinks that the state has far greater kind of tentacles into society and controlling things than it did or does now and did then as well in the 70s. But this of course also was to bring it in to some of the history of the moment. I mean, this is you do have the second major labor government that comes in 64 with Wilson, and he's there for about 4 years until the Heath government takes over in 1970. And this movie comes out in 1972. But basically by this point, and this is true across the world, that this is kind of like the Keynesian consensus that there has to be some kind of state involvement in order to keep society going, that markets have to be regulated. But this is also kind of the moment of there's this massive backlash that's now hitting it because there is now an economic crisis that is that is in the process of taking place, where profit rates are going down. Corporations, are not. It's not the good days of the 50s anymore, and so there is this question of how does the welfare state continue? And there are critiques that both of like excess spending, but also there's critiques of, and sometimes from the left even, critiques of like people becoming too dependent on the government. And so there's this whole kind of the welfare state is also restrictive of people's lives. And so obviously, so Kubrick doesn't know that neoliberalism is about to come. And he's not, I don't think he's a Marxist, or, you know, he's not like, he's not hanging with Eric Hobsbawm. But the point is that there is this tension of like, what is the role of the state going to be in the future that's already kind of on the minds of people at the time. And, you know, and you know, I think obviously with the themes of fascism, and there is also this, you know, the beginnings of the EU that's taking place at this point. It's not, the EU is not a thing yet until 1991 with Maastricht, but you do have the European
common market, sure.
Right, yeah, the economic community. And so there is this like question of like, what is the role of the state, either at the national level or at the kind of supranational level, and how does, you know, and fascism has been in Europe an option, essentially, that has been one response of how, you know, what is the role of the state. And so I think that's where it's right that this is a dystopian future where it's like the state has taken a fascistic turn, and it has no interest in the human beings that are living in it, and entirely just on kind of the reproduction of business as usual. And so I think the ending is just really cynical from like kind of at this macro level of, all right, well, this technique didn't work. Doesn't matter. We'll move on. We'll figure out something next. As long as we can get everyone to continue to like believe in the, you know, the process, basically.
Yeah, and it seems like whatever happened with Alex's jump off the roof that like made it. Yeah, whatever happened there. Whatever happened there, a man jumped off the roof. No, like whatever happened with Alex's turn, you know, Alex's jump off the roof must have really jolted society into, or at least the press, into kind of turning him into the sympathetic character, which means that, you know, the state is the enemy at that point in time. Like the bad press is something that they want to mitigate. So when I look at how they're going to use Alex, they're using him as like a press thing, because suddenly, you know, once the consensus starts to unravel in the press and whatever else, like, you know, they're turning against the government quickly, and they see that as something that they want to stop the hemorrhage of. No,
that makes sense to me. So, yeah, I do want to. We're a little over an hour and a half, and I do want to wrap up. Still have to have dinner over here. There's been a lot going on today.
I've been spoiled from that Shining stream. I just assumed there's another hour and a half of this.
I still have to edit clips for the Jacobin show. Wednesdays at 7, occurring on the Jacobin channel. At 6? Wednesdays at 6 on the Jacobin channel.
I hear it's a pretty good show. And tonight's episode was really good, and you should go watch that after this if you didn't already.
Nice. Should for sure do that. Andy, do you have any final thoughts, perhaps related to the movie A Clockwork Orange?
A couple things. One thing before I actually go over my thoughts really quickly, I just got to say, John Paul Leon, one of my favorite artists, passed away this week. He was a comic book artist, did lots of Superman, Batman. Static Shock was one of his big books, and you know, absolutely sad to hear, because he was only 49 years old, lost his battle with cancer. The other thing I just kind of want to quickly mention, since we didn't really get into the music that much, the music was actually done by a very interesting woman, Wendy. What is her last name? I just blanked on her last name, but she is an absolute pioneer. She worked with Moog to develop the Moog. She was a musician, composer, developed ambient music years before Brian Eno did, and was also trans. Like that's like a footnote in her whole long interesting musical biography, because she like created new forms of musical theory and stuff. I don't even understand that stuff, but whatever. She's very cool. Absolutely check her out whenever you're done. It's something not to be overlooked with it. She also did the music for Tron and The Shining.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's so much to get into with that, but I'm not even going to start because we don't have time. Because we now need to get to my thoughts. This has actually been, one of my favorite movies. I first saw it in college. I was absolutely transfixed by this film, and I couldn't believe how good this was. And I have an issue of watching movies before like 1980 because there's just something about the older films that just don't quite hit me right, and it's like the camp, the melodrama just doesn't quite seem natural. But like after 1980, like a lot of that went away. It was like more naturalistic performances after the 70s kind of reinvention of cinema. So I tend not to like seek out older movies because of that. However, somebody handed me a copy of this in college. I sat down and watched about half of it. I got up to like they're well into prison. And a friend of mine knocked on the door, was like, "Oh, what are you watching?" I just started it. Let me just rewind it. I just kept rewinding and rewinding. I'm like, I guess I watched more than I thought. And but yeah, it was absolutely worth watching the first half of it again after I had already watched it. It's an absolutely like really thoughtful film about the is it what's in your mind, or is it your actions that make you a moral being? Questions that I was dealing with at the time, because at the time I was still thinking I was Christian or something.
Fair enough. Forrest?
I mean, I think we talked about everything that was worth talking about on the stream, but I really just was struck by, I guess, I mean, I don't think that they necessarily knew what was coming, like Kubrick or anyone else really knew what was coming this far into the future, but the turn towards neoliberalism, like you can see the foundations being laid throughout this movie, and you can see that the kind of the wheels turning, I guess, in this kind of proto-fascist almost like gangland way that society was viewed, that would lead to like a far right turn, and like just this obsession with like data driven needing to, I guess, prove that the state was doing something about crime, needing to prove that the state was handling the stuff, needing to appeal to capital and kind of stabilize society in this way. I don't know. I was just really struck by all of that.
Fair enough. Kale?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I now want to ask Adana Usmani what his thoughts are on the Clockwork Orange, because he wrote this really. We just had him on Jacobin show a couple of weeks ago, or last week rather. And he has a fantastic essay people should check out on like the economic origins of mass incarceration in the U.S. But obviously, I mean, this is like part of the explanation is that whereas most other countries, most developed countries, ended up going the public policy route of like we deal with crime and with poverty through public programs, social programs. The U.S. didn't, and ended up going the punitive route of locking people up rather than giving them a job. So, but obviously, this is the dystopian version of England, where the Wilson government doesn't succeed, and the first or the second, although obviously, I mean, the second does kind of objectively fail. Because that's when you get austerity by the end of it. But anyways, the point, my take on the movie, it has been a couple of years since I last saw it, and my first introduction actually was through the book that I'm pretty sure my dad recommended I read when I was in like middle school, which is in hindsight maybe a questionable decision. But it like, and it, I
that's like something Jason Miles' dad would do.
Well, kindred spirits. Yeah, I mean, it is just one of those really kind of strange, fascinating movies that there's like a mystique around it. Part of it being that like it's like an X-rated movie, and so any of those kind of have like the extra layer of taboo that is smeared all over it. I mean, it's in hindsight, it's kind of fun. Like the more that I've like spent time with Stanley Kubrick movies, in some ways, it's like some of like the mystique around Clockwork Orange has kind of faded, and I've actually come to appreciate some of his other movies more. That I actually do think that that sounds like fun. I actually think that a lot of like Kubrick movies, again, like when I gave you 3 hours of The Shining, like I think there's a lot to his movies, and I actually think this one is fairly simple, of just like state breakdown, state failure, and how like that warps people's minds who are in that situation. And of course, Alex being who he is, of like kind of a gang leader within a gang society, a society run by gangs, you know, at the state level, and with no consideration for like human life and like, you know, developing humans to be better people and live better lives. You know, he ends up just becoming, you know, an opportunist in the same way that everything in that society is an opportunist. And he's, you know, between the violence that I'm sure he's probably experienced, they don't really like they don't really give too much of an indication of direct violence, but of course, like between the correctional officer grabbing his yarbles earlier, and just everything, like the fact that as like a teenager, it makes complete sense for him in his particular world to be as violent as he is, and like it is like a successful way for him to like to exist in society. Again, it speaks to just like kind of what happens when like there is no like social structure that is there to like take care of people and to foster people and to like have to be socialized correctly. And so when the institutions fail, when society fails, you get Alex.
Fair enough. Ryan, you have any final thoughts?
Good movie.
Well, I agree with that. So just to quickly plug a few things coming up for on Friday, for Philosophy Friday with Jen. I think we're doing Bertrand Russell's Philosophy of Language this time. On Sunday, going to do part 2 of the Zizek Peterson debate breakdown. If you didn't see part 1, you should check that out. It was a lot of fun. We had an interview with the man himself at the
which we're gonna be premiering on Saturday.
On Saturday, yeah. So
yeah.
So we'll premiere. We'll premiere as a standalone thing. The interview with Zizek. Other than that, we just spent like 2 hours breaking down Peterson's opening statement because so many things he said were wrong. But we're going to finish that on Sunday. On Monday, Sam Cedar's going to be here to talk about some of the highlights from his many debates with libertarians, which, you know, if anything is core GTAA content, that's it. And then in the second half, we're going to have Touré Reed and our friend Jason Miles on. So really looking forward to that. I appreciate, you know, everybody coming on to watch. Oh, apparently you should also watch the Jacobin show on Wednesday nights. I guess that's good. So
yeah, I mean, if you're not doing anything before movie talk, we talk about socialism.
Oh yeah, all right, yeah, you can get a little socialism in your evening before the movie stuff. So that's none wrong with that. So yeah, you should watch all that. Really appreciate all of you guys coming on to talk about the Clockwork Orange with me. And left is best.
Thank you.
And happy birthday, Karl Marx.